Okay, thank you. I discovered my voice. I'm delighted. Um, Not only for that, but also to welcome all of you to this webinar that's being sponsored by Pacific Tango, our Pacific Tango group. Hi, I'm Wendy Lally, and I'm proud to say I'm a member of the group, and we're all thrilled that you could join us today for a very interesting topic. Uh, Pacific Tango Group helps Asian companies succeed in North America and North America companies succeed in Asia. It's a fair exchange, don't you think? We engage with clients prior to entering their target market to help them plan and prepare for a successful launch. We also work with clients after they've arrived in their target market to help them establish their physical, legal, and business presence there. And finally, we work with established subsidiaries of Asian and US companies to help them stay abreast of the local market and business changes. Pacific Tango Group is actually a consortium of highly skilled international business professionals representing a functional service area, several functional service areas, such as sales, digital marketing, technology implementation, strategy, operations, human resources, and distribution, to name just a few. Clients engage with Pacific Tango Group in a variety of ways. First is a short-term task or project. These may be limited in scope because the client doesn't have the internal resources to complete themselves, or they're just on a limited time basis. Some examples would be a translation, a documentation, a business process review. We also have midterm initiatives, and these are advertising campaigns, corporate or product branding, creation of an accounting system, and sales and business development are all come under this umbrella that fall into this category. Long-term sustained outsourcing, accounting, HR, sales, and business development. For more information about these and the other things that we do, please get in touch with Pacific Tango Group. And for contact information, you can reach us at our website, pacifictangogroup.com. And now I'd like to introduce the star of the presentation, Sjofors, who is absolutely a fascinating person and business person and expert on pricing. He has a special interest in this area. As a serial entrepreneur running companies in Europe and the US, he did pricing experiments. Some of these worked out very, very well, and others didn't work at all. And sometimes we learn more from our failures than our successes. Per realized that what business can teach about pricing is often too abstract if you get that information from a school or a book, and too academic for a business executive to act on. Likewise, with books about pricing, it's the same kind of thing. They kind of concentrate on theory. Consequently, he set out to make pricing practical and actionable. His methods stem from a deep understanding of how the 4 Ps of marketing interact. And that would be, made a little note to myself, product, promotion, price, and you're going to fill in the other, right, Per?
Nice. Yes.
And how changes in one of these 3 affect pricing. And of course, that's a major concern for all of us. Since then, he's been at the forefront as a thought leader in everything concerning pricing, and he's going to share that wisdom with us today. He appears regularly on podcasts and business radio shows and gets quoted regularly in the financial press, including Forbes, Fortune magazine, and Industry Week, Business Insider, and the Financial Times. And I am absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to share my screen, and I have a presentation here about international pricing, and I hope you all are going to hope you're all going to enjoy it. So, international pricing. It works whether you want to enter the US market from outside, or whether you want to export from the US. But so this is a masterclass in how to develop pricing power, and it's a subset of international pricing. We're going to talk about a little bit of basics for pricing power, psychology. We're going to talk about the importance of understanding how sales volume is affected by different prices, and segmentation, how that leads to deep insights into the market. We're going to talk about some specific cases when it comes to specific international prices, and eventually we're also going to have some time for discussion. What I'm not going to talk about is things like tariffs and shipping costs and so forth, because those are part of cost of goods sold and part of the cost, not the price. But if we start with the very beginnings here, and I'm going to show you several case studies, and it's unlikely that any of these case studies are in exactly your industry. So you need to think about them, see them as inspiration, and look at these case studies and think about them, how they could be applied in your situation. But there's not many people who do what I do. So I want to just very briefly talk about how I got into this. And just like Wendy said, first of all, I had a chance to run several companies, one out of Zurich that distributed products over Europe. I headed up a subsidiary of a Japanese firm that distributed products over Europe. I then came here to the US, ran several companies, and during that process, I set up 2 joint venture companies in Korea, 2 joint venture companies in Japan, and 1 joint venture in Taiwan. And I introduced about 8 companies to the US market altogether. But like Wendy said, I did experiments with pricing in these companies, and some of those experiments completely blew up. They were complete disasters, whereas others worked very well. And we couldn't find, from what I've learned in business school, what worked, or why some experiments worked and others didn't. And then there's there's some magic about pricing, some people think. So I set out to create a process that would make every pricing experiment a success. And that is the process that is important for anybody who wants to start selling internationally. But why is price so important then? Well, if you think about profitability, profits in any company comes from only 3 variables. It's the total cost of what you sell, it's your total sales volume, and it's the price of what you sell. And if you do a thought experiment, this has been done several times. If you change one of these 3 variables 1 single percent, how does that affect profitability? Well, if you can increase sales 1% for the average company, profits goes up with 3.5%. If you can reduce cost with 1%, profits in the average company goes up 5.5%. But if you can increase price or decrease discounting 1%, for the average company, profitability goes up 11.3%. So pricing really has the highest leverage when it comes to the profitability. But pricing doesn't live in a vacuum, and this is why it's so important to understand the correlations of these 4 P's of marketing. And I'm using this jousting horse with this knight as an example. Think of the horse as your product or service, the knight as marketing, and the lance as sales. Want to reach as far as you can into the customer community. And then the actual tip of the lance is price. And what this means is that if the horse only have 3 legs, you're not going to be very successful. And this jousting horse and knight is not going to be very successful. If the knight steers the horse in a circle, it's not going to be very successful. If the lance is only about a foot or so long, it's not going to be very successful. And if there is no tip of the lance, or the lance is too, the tip is too blunt, there's also not going to be very much success here. And so all of these four needs to work together. And another way of looking at this is you have to have a really in-depth understanding of the market to be successful. I love this picture because here what we have is two companies that are selling a commodity product. They're in the price war and they have no customers. Whereas this company understands the market and provide a product the market wants, have all the clients, and for that reason also can charge higher prices. Very important to know. And that's why we come back to the 4 P's of marketing and how they all interact. But then there's psychology when it comes to pricing. And what's most important there is something called expectation bias. And expectation bias is something that everybody has. And not only that, it sets an expectation of quality. So if the price is too low, buyers expect quality. And we've all been there. You know, we want to buy something and we look at it and we say, oh, this is so cheap, it can't be any good. So the lower the price, the more buyers expect low quality and will therefore not buy. And of course, that prices can be too high is not earth-shattering. And what that means in the end is that 81% of buyers buys the best value, not the lowest price. And so the right price is always a balance. And that right price comes from marketing, it comes from competition, it comes from functions, features, and benefits, and of course, it comes from price. So in order to understand how all of this is done, you need to understand sales volume at different prices. And when you do, we create charts like this. Here we can see price on the x-axis. We have sales volume on the on the y-axis, and there's always going to be a price that generates the highest sales volume. And if you look at lower prices than that, it becomes a message of inferior quality. You're going to see many of these charts as we go forward in the presentation. So it's really important that you understand how this works. And of course, that prices can be too expensive and therefore higher prices lead to lower sales is not earth-shattering. But the other thing you get here is something called price walls. These are psychological price points where small price changes generate a significant change in price, in sales volume. And just to give you an example, about 2 years ago, I spent some time with a vice president at HP, and he told me how they had done some tests. They took this one product, a computer, they inched up the price $1 at a time, and they could go up $17 without any change in volume. But if they went up $18, sales just fell through the floor. That means two things. They had found one of these price falls, but it also meant that they had been leaving $17 on the table for every computer they sold, which makes sense, or which makes a difference when you're selling 10,000 of these a day and it's a low margin product. But there's more to this, because we can also model revenue. And this is interesting because the price that generates the highest sales volume and the price that generates the highest revenue is never the same. And in this case, we also have two revenue peaks, which is quite common. The left one generates relatively high sales volume, whereas the right one generates relatively low sales volume. And because of that, it's a more profitable price because COGS is lower. Let me go back. I wanted to show you something. Now, and this means that once you have this information, setting the right price is really very easy. You select maximum sales, maximum profit, or somewhere in between. But you do it from data, not from gut feel. So, all right, so now, but the real value comes in segmentation. Now, what do I mean with that? Let's look at this. Here we have 3 customer segments, 1, 2, 3. And we have these curves for these 1, 2, 3 segments. This is the curve for segment 1, the curve for segment 2. And what this means is that if prices is set below 6,500, segment 1 would generate the highest sales volume. If prices is set between 6,500 and 10,000, segment 2 will generate the highest sales volume. So you should focus on segment 2. And under no circumstances should you sell over 10,000 because of this massive price war. And segment 3 is small and lead to small, low sales volume, so it should be ignored. Some examples here. Here we have a feature. Feature 1 leads to the highest sales volume, so this is something that one should lead to in marketing and sales. Feature 2 leads to also a relatively high sales volume, so that should also be used in marketing and sales. Whereas feature 3 leads to the lowest sales volume and should not be used in marketing and sales because it dilutes the message. But this is all about segmenting attributes. So we start with our prediction of sales volume at different prices, and then we segment it with buyer attributes. This could be, if it's consumers, it could be normal demographics, location, age, education, and stuff like that. If it's B2B, it may be use case, size of company, industry, and so forth of the buyer. Then we have the same with product or service attributes, features, functions, benefits. So you get to know what features and functions lead to the highest sales volume and the highest prices. And the same with seller attributes, which is everything about your company, how you go to market, your marketing messages, your even your brand name and your logo will make a difference for sales volume. So out of this comes a whole go-to-market strategy, which customers to focus, which product or service to focus, how to do the marketing, how to do the sale, and how set a pricing strategy that will minimize friction and maximize revenue. But then we come to international pricing. And what I'm going to talk about here is a little bit, we have to have an understanding that if you're successful in your home market and you go international, everything is different. Everything is the most common mistake I have seen again and again and again, that companies, as they go international, believe that what works in their home market would work somewhere else. It doesn't, or it certainly doesn't work as well as it could, because willingness and ability to pay is going to be different. And that you can find out through this. Anybody knows what this is? Well, this is the Big Mac index, or purchasing parity index. This is something that the Economist is publishing every year, where you can see how what purchasing power different countries have, and obviously this affects how you can price your product or service. So the Big Mac index is sort of funny, I think, but there is also a real purchasing parity index that you should be familiar with when you go international. Competition is always going to be different when you go international, and buyer preferences are all going to be different, and you need to know how they are different. Sales channels and how people buy is going to be different. The circumstance around how they're buying is going to be different. And once you have all this knowledge, you can use this knowledge. So know how everything is different between your home market and your export market. Once you have that knowledge, you can use it to differentiate yourself in that market in meaningful ways, so that you gain pricing power. And pricing power is the ability to increase prices without losing sales volume. And we all can figure out what that does for profitability, right? But so I'm going to give you some examples here of really of mistakes people have done as they're trying to export, as they're trying to go international. The first one is fishing lures. I don't know anything about fishing lures or fishing, by the way, but what I do know is that this company did it the wrong way. So here we can see that what this company does is that they are focusing their marketing on the color pattern of this fishing lure. And they have even a competition to come up with a name for this pattern. The problem here is that few buyers care about the pattern, and those who do have a very low willingness to pay. So this becomes a company that completely, they're barking up the wrong tree. They're trying to sell with the wrong messages to the wrong people. Obviously, once they knew that, it was very easy for them to change the marketing to be relevant for this is a European company trying to come into the US, and it was then very easy to fix that once they had this information. Another example of differences is a music stand. Here we can see product feature preferences for US and the UK. We can see that a feature that this music stand is stable drives the high sales in the US. Right? You can see the red curve is higher than the yellow curve. And sturdy also drives high sales in the US. In the UK, though, it is lightweight that makes a difference, right? You see now suddenly you have the yellow curve on top. So then one wonder why is it? You know, well, if you have teenagers working, you know, going to and from music classes and so forth, in the UK, they are most likely to travel on public transport. So lightweight is very important. In the US, they would just take this music stand and put it in the trunk of the car. So lightweight is not as important, right? Circumstances are different. And therefore, you have to have different marketing messages for this music stand in the US and in the UK. Another example, a bicycle accessory. 3 countries here, A, B, C. We can see that commuting is the most important activity for those living in the country A, and those who want to buy this bicycle accessory. Whereas we can see that recreation is the most important variable for those in country B and C. And how that reflects into pricing is commuting leads to the highest willingness to pay, and therefore the highest prices in country A. So that is the main theme for marketing, and what will govern how prices should be set in country A. Whereas recreation leads to the highest willingness to pay in country C. So that should be used in marketing in country C, and it will be that governs the prices for this product in country C. And then we have a business service that was sold in various countries. We can see that it was all done obviously in local currency that is translated to US dollars. But we can see that China generates a very high sales volume at low prices. We can also see that Argentina generate higher sales volume also, but at slightly higher prices. Then Mexico generate higher sales volume at further higher prices, and so does Thailand, and so does Turkey, and so does India. So here we can see on the scale that all of these countries have different willingness to pay for the same product, and therefore they should have different prices, of course. And the highest sales volume we get from Brazil. If you know this, you know where you're going to start with your international expansion, right? You don't want to go to China. You probably want to go to Brazil, you know? So so I mean, very important to think about how this is going to affect your go-to-market strategy internationally. So it becomes very important to know how the sales volume at different prices differ in different countries, and segment the customers on willingness to pay, and on knowing what feature functions drives the highest sales volume, and what marketing and sales that drives the highest sales volume, and what structure you're going to have on your pricing. And if you know all this, you will have sales success, right? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing, specific international pricing considerations. It's good to go international, but you have, in some cases, be a little bit careful. First of all, gray import. Well, think about you selling to you're selling to some cheap countries, or where you sell at low prices because the willingness to pay and ability to pay is low in those countries, and you're selling at higher prices to more expensive countries. Now, what can happen is that those in the what can happen is that those in the cheap countries start importing those into the more expensive countries. I've been involved in this. I have experience of this myself. We were selling a product into the UK, France, and Italy, and the Italians had the highest sales volume, so therefore they also got the cheapest prices. And the product that we sold to the Italians ended up in the hands of people in France and in the UK, and it was really very, very difficult, and it created a lot of friction with our distributor in the UK, because we always had to defend why we're selling all these things cheaply in Italy. So the good gray import is good and bad. It is good because it keeps the prices down in the most expensive areas, and because of that, you are likely to increase sales volume. But it also can create a lot of friction in those areas that are most expensive, and you may even lose resellers or distributors that you may have. And it also creates a lot of stress for the people that has to deal with it. So, so accepting gray import is a strategic decision. Are you going to accept maybe a lower sales volume in those low-cost areas, to not get gray import, or are you going to accept gray import and have stress dealing with it? Another problem that one have to be aware of is selling to global companies. And let's say you sell something again to the same global company in a cheap area at low price, at a much more higher price in an expensive area. And of course, global companies, they have communications. So it may happen that the folks in the expensive area suddenly get wind of the prices that are sold in the more cheap areas, and you'll have a not very pleasant conversation with the company saying that they demand the same price in the expensive area as in the cheap area, right? And it may actually even lead to them asking you to refund them what they call overpayment that they've done, which could be very, very damaging for a company. So selling this exactly the same product in different areas is something to think about, that this can happen. And I've been involved in this a couple of times as well. So I'm just to give you some examples. These are obviously chocolate bars from the same from the same company in I think Russia and Germany, and you can see that they're really the same product. But if you're going to avoid the risk for the risk I'm just mentioning, selling to global companies, there have to be real differences in the product, different brands, different form factor, and so forth. Obviously, I'm using chocolate here as an example, and this needs to be relevant for your particular product or service. So there's a cost versus benefits here when you sell to global companies. So if I'm summarizing all of this, the decision landscape is always going to be different in different companies, in different countries, and you need to know those differences. Willingness to pay is always going to be different, and you need to know how those are different, right? And you need to leverage all this knowledge for success, and that's when you're going to get it. So that was all for me for this time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Per. That was excellent and really fascinating. Tell me, anyone have any questions? Because this is the time to offer them up, and let's get some answers for you.
There are some questions in the chat, Wendy.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I can see Leon here. How can a startup get the willingness to pay data per segment feature in the US? Well, this is something that we do in my company, and we're in we're associated with the Pacific Tango group. So this is something that we do. We help clients to get this data so they can really ensure that their international expansion or expansion into the US is going to be successful.
Kevin, you had a question. What sources do you use to get the user preference information?
It's a very different way of doing market research. So if you go to a market research firm, they will not be able to do this. But having said that, it is still online market research. So reaching out to a company's market, meaning both customers or non-customers and people who never heard about the company.
Jura had a comment. Samsung is notorious for doing exactly that. They get bids from all parts. I guess you were speaking about the gray area or the global area. They get bids from all parts of the world and then hold the higher cost areas to the lower cost prices.
Yep. They're not the only ones, and I mean, from their point of view, it's a good thing to do, but as a seller here to Samsung or another global company, we have to make sure that we have to make sure that we differentiate our products so that the product we sell in those cheaper areas are substantially or enough different from the product you sell in the more expensive areas, so that they can't be completely substituted.
When you talk about the difference, are you so you're suggesting that it's packaged differently? Is it named differently? What would the advice be to give
Different
to a company
packaging,
that's
different
doing
brands, stuff like that. It does. You can't just go in with a different where the difference is just cosmetic. There has to be real differences.
And just to build on that, those differences have to be perceived by the customer.
Yes, clearly.
I was going to say that maybe the real difference is the perception on the part of the customer about those products, that one is of more value or somehow better quality, even though it may not be.
Yeah, I was working with, this is maybe 5 years ago, I was working with Monsanto on this, and they even had issues where they had their own subsidiary, all right, selling back. This was somewhere in South America, that was selling in competition to their other subsidiary in some other, I think it was Australia, you know.
One of the things I saw was I worked for a Swiss company. We had a German sales. The German sales were trying to not get the Swiss price because of the currency differences. This is another sort of curveball, right? And like when the Japanese yen gets really weak or whatever, this is another where it kind of bounces around. Any experience with that?
Well, you need to make sure that your clauses of in your contracts allow for you to adjust prices based on currency variations, you know. So because that's always that is always an issue, you know. So.
Per, first of all, that was just fantastic. Thank you. Just the look, all the information, you're just brilliant. I can see I can understand and apply all this to kind of products, like physical products, but as a consultant, does it differ much does it differ much for like services? Like, you know, you're selling kind of your experience and what's in your head. Does it kind of work the same way for that?
Yeah, well, you can't have gray import when you sell services. I mean, you can if you're a large consulting firm, because you can have, you know, consultants from a low-cost country coming in and doing consulting in a high-cost country, but you can't have the same issue with selling to global companies. But in terms of looking at how sales volume is affected by different prices and different marketing messages and different customer profiles and all that stuff, there's no difference between services and products.
Leon Rubenstein had another great question.
Yeah.
He said, my startup tries to sell a physical product in a B2B market in the USA. The high-end competitor's product sells for $1,500. Our product has a superior performance. In order to be in the value offering, should we sell above or just under $1,500?
It really depends only on whether you can differentiate yourself in ways. If you can differentiate yourself in such ways that are meaningful for your clients, then you have a better performing product, then you should sell at higher prices. Now, there's another thing which is also well, if you have, it sounds like this is a sort of a disruptive product of some kind. Okay,
that's true.
And if you have a disruptive product, you are only going to sell to early adopters.
That's good too.
That's good news and bad news.
Yes.
The good news is that there is early adopters buy for all different reasons, and low price is not one of them.
Yes.
The bad news is that there's only few of them.
Fully agree. Unfortunately, fully agree.
So the challenge for you is to sell to high prices, so you can recoup your development cost and so forth, because you need to make sure that you have, because you're going to sell only relatively few, and there is it's one of the most common mistakes startups do when they come up with an innovative product of some kind, or service for that matter, that they go to market, they only find a few of those early adopters, And when they look at what they promised in the business plan to investors and stuff like that versus what they've actually sold, they panic and they lower their prices. And what happened then is either no change in sales or even lower sales. And then they're in the quandrum because then they feel they can't increase their prices, you know? So it's always best to go out high. Because again, you can always give discounts, you can always do deals, but it's always much more difficult to increase prices once you lower them. It's not impossible, but it's
yeah. So a couple things you said. Number one, I think
Thank
apart
you.
from Netflix, has anybody ever been able to raise their prices? That's one. And the second thing, I was laughing about the whole, if it's too low, too cheap, they won't buy. TSMC, which probably most people know now and hear a lot about because of the chip shortage in Taiwan. Two things really were going on there. One is, yes, you always had to go at a higher price because otherwise they thought it was cheap quality. But
Yeah.
then you also had to buffer it because you had to negotiate. They would, you know, even if it was 0.5% difference, you know, they had to have a winning. There was a winning thing in the culture. So do you find that is also a sort of a cultural issue that has to be thought about? Do you find any of that happening in different industries, say maybe in the West, based on
well,
industry?
if you look in general terms, if you look at if you look at Chinese companies, they're all about cheap, you know. They are not looking at they're looking only at trying to compete on price, and value pricing is not something that I think exists in China, you know, unless you're selling luxury goods, truly luxury goods, because then willingness to pay is astronomical, you know. If I've seen this in different categories, not really. I do see, maybe this is you know, really a reflection on the people I talk to, but I hear more and more people actually saying to me that I mean, they come to us and they say, you know, I need to raise my prices, but I don't know how much and how do I do it and so forth, you know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was kind of looking at. I just went, yeah, I guess I was just thinking there are certain industries, like even in America, certain industries, yeah, it's just a commodity and it becomes that, or there's other ones where like, okay, no, you have this place to do it. But I think you kind of nailed that. I think a lot of the luxury products and cars seem to get more expensive every year.
But even with even with commodity products, there are ways to gain some pricing power. Often you can create bundles. You can create bundles of products and services. You can add services, you know, in addition. One of that I'm using in some of my other teachings is the example of a company called Hilti. They sell power tools, and they're based in Liechtenstein of all places, and these are power tools for professional carpenters and stuff like that. But they have a whole slew of services that they add, you know, you know, sort of fleet management and product and product optimizations and all different things to add value to what is otherwise would be commodity products. And in fact, I have a customer here in Southern California who is renting out something as commoditized as those steel plates you're running over when there's a trench in the street. They have some 65% of the market share. And they are about 25% more expensive than competition. And what they have done, they have positioned themselves as thought leaders. And what they do is that they have training programs to train these people that are digging the trenches on safety and all different things. And so not only is the training department, if you like, by itself a profit center and a very profitable profit center, but it elevates the whole company into that thought leader position that gives them pricing power, so they can be more expensive and still have the largest market share among dozens of competitors.
Yeah, Hilti is written up in the Harvard Business Review for a case study where they addressed the construction tools to companies, and they just said, okay, we'll just supply it to you. You don't worry, you just pay us, we'll take care of everything, theft and repairs and all that stuff. And that just revolutionized what they did. One other question, Scott Galloway talks about rundles now, recurring revenue bundles. Is that anything that you've I guess it's starting off, kind of kicking off now? I even heard, I think Volvo wants to do it, where you get these updated. Is it Volvo that does it?
Yeah, you subscribe to a car. Whatever, I don't know how that works, but this was really pioneered by the folks making engines for airplanes, and it used to be that the cost of the engines for an airplane was about a third or maybe a little bit more of the entire cost of the plane. And some 20 years ago, thereabouts, GE started to go away from that model, and instead the airline the airline just pays for usage.
Pay for use.
And then this is good for everybody, It's good for the airline, because if they don't use the plane, they don't pay anything for the engines. It's good for the engine manufacturer, because they get reoccurring revenue forever, and is one of the reasons that ticket prices are so low,
So is that something you're seeing more and more, that you would have actually priced into your recommendation to like companies or something, or is it really specific to a certain hardware product?
Well, most of it is software products. I mean, that's where you really have the subscription, all the SaaS products and so forth.
Yeah.
What's new is that it's coming into hardware. There's very, I don't see it very much yet. I think it's going to be, it's going to be a slow evolution. But it's going to be interesting to see how Volvo eventually does it, because buying a car on subscription sounds a little unusual, at least.
Yeah. I think medical devices in particular do a lot of the pay-per-use stuff, because people don't have that upfront pricing to put out there and stuff like that. But then they get people to actually do it and use it, and then becomes like the puppy dog syndrome. It's inside, and now I need it.
Yeah, maybe.
We have one more question from Marcy. I'll read it for you. If you have different willingness to pay in different countries, how do you protect from arbitrage opportunities? For example, a gray market being created via Amazon of products getting purchased at a lower price in one market and resold at a higher price in another, thereby lowering potential profits of the manufacturer and or creating issues with distributors for that manufacturer in certain markets.
Well, this is what I said. This is a strategic decision every company has to make. You either have to, when we talk about the extreme cases here, you either say, I have one price for everybody, and then there's not going to be any gray import, because there's no value in doing it. The opposite is to have vastly different prices in different areas, and then you are going to have gray import, and you're going to have there are loads of people making a living buying stuff cheap on Amazon and then just reselling it at Amazon at higher prices, you know? So because many people, when they go into Amazon, they just underprice themselves. I mean, Amazon is all about commoditization. But the other extreme case is that you're going to have vastly different prices in different areas or for different distributors. And then you just accept that there's going to be gray import and arbitrage. And as a manufacturer, that may actually be a good thing, because you're going to have increased sales volume. And that means that your cost is going to go down, right? Or your cost of goods sold is going to go down. But the flip side is that there's going to be a lot of friction with those people that you're selling to in high areas. And you just have to accept. So it's a strategic decision. What are you going to do? And it's going to be different for different companies, different product lines, and so forth.
Well, does anyone else have a question before because we kind of have to wrap up at this point, I think we'll.
Actually, I think we have a couple more minutes. I have just a general question for Per. So what should a B2B manufacturer who's interested in entering the US market do prior to entering? Can you take us through the steps? What would be a good procedure for them?
Well, again, what we do in my company is we do this research. We create those charts that you saw. So we can from our work, we can tell a manufacturer, whether it's B2B or B2C, which customers to target, and you want to target the customers at least to the highest revenue. We can tell them what marketing messages and stuff like that, marketing channels lead to the highest revenue. We can tell them what sales methodologies and so forth leads to the highest revenue. And we can tell them what features and functions drives the highest revenue, and what pricing strategy that minimize friction and maximize revenue. So it's really a whole go-to-market strategy that is data driven. We don't implement it, but that's for us in Pacific Tango Group to help implement it. But it's done from a solid data point of view.
Over to you, Wendy.
Okay, I'm just thinking science wins again. I mean, it's, fact over what you hope the answers are.
Yeah.
How can we contact you? Can you put your contact details somewhere?
Yeah, sure. I can put I ended up with it, but I can put my email in chat here.
Yeah,
And
I'll
can
also
people
put
reach
the
you?
info at pacifictango.org, either one.
Yeah. So.
And people can reach you through your website, can't they?
Yes, of course.
Because we do have that. Well, again, I want to thank you for a really brilliant presentation. It was just wonderful. And it's got me thinking. I'm in the service business and I'm trying to figure out how I can apply what you taught us to that.
I know, right, Wendy?
I can tell you that what you saw is one episode of a 20 episode masterclass in pricing. So there's a little bit to think about.
I think Wendy said science wins again. I think you should just use that Google line. I think data beats opinions. Yeah. I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions about pricing, but your data beats. It's a nice opinion. Here's the data that actually shows it. Thank you very much. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. And thanks for your
all
time.
of you who haven't attended these before, this is part of a series that PTG, Pacific Tango Group, is running, and we hope that you'll look for us again. We do post these on Facebook, and we'll send you invitations to join us again, and we hope that you'll do so.
All right.
And also check out our website and contact us if you're interested in joining the group or learning more about our services. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for listening to me.
Thanks.